is the Bearcast, presented by Bird Culture Ford. Bird Culture Ford has been in Waco since 1936. Ford is the #1 selling truck in Texas 43 years running. The Bearcast is also presented by WellMed Medical Management and USMD Health System Dallas. Here's Craig Smoak and Grayson Grundhoefer.
And welcome into the Bearcast on SicEm365.com on this Tuesday, November the 12th, 2024. I'm Craig Smoak, joined as always by Grayson Grundhoefer, also Garrett Ross behind the scenes. And we are here with you for the next hour and some change to talk all things Baylor athletics. That includes football back in the fold after a week away. Seems like it was longer than that when you get a little bit of a break, but just a few days of rest and recuperation, and now a stretch run, 3 games, maybe 4 if they can win one more, including the upcoming contest on Saturday at West Virginia, so we will get into that. Also, Baylor men's and women's basketball getting underway as well, so we will dabble in that too, and get to your mailbag questions and anything else that may be out there in the Baylor universe. But Grayson, a bye week for the Bears. They're 5-4. They are back to being competitive and looking good and winning games in different styles and different places. But one thing this football program has never done is win a football game in Morgantown, West Virginia. It doesn't matter if it was Bryce Petty and Art Briles or if it was any combination of teams you want to throw out there. Granted, they've only been playing since the 2010s, the early 2010s. It's a very recent series, but it's had a few classic moments already, and whatever you want to chalk it up to, they have been unable to win in Morgantown no matter how good they've been.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of the story of this week, I guess. And we've kind of talked about this, honestly, over the course of the last, 3 weeks now. It's these little things that you're trying to overcome that you haven't been able to overcome, whether it's winning 2 games in a row, whether it's winning 3 games in a row, whether it's beating TCU, like these little hurdles that you're trying to get past. Winning your first conference home game since 2022 was another one that they accomplished against Oklahoma State. So a lot of these things, they're kind of just on a mission to get this program back to where, honestly, it should be. And so I think this week is another opportunity for that, right? Against a West Virginia team that is kind of in the similar boat, as Baylor. They're trying to figure out a way to finish the season strong, and Baylor's trying to go in there and try to finish their season strong as well. And now they're going to meet in Morgantown where, you mentioned Baylor's had struggles. Baylor has also had a bunch of competitive games in Morgantown as well, to go along with, I believe, a couple blowouts too.
Yeah, they've definitely experienced some blowouts. West Virginia, Dana Holgerson had a couple of those moments. But I guess like beating up on Matt Rule there in that little stretch run. Before that, it was really some shootouts with Briles and Holgerson. And then the last couple years has been West Virginia kind of exerting their authority while Baylor has struggled on the whole. So now back to more of a competitive, even matchup like it was 3-4 years ago. When you kind of went back and forth, so we'll see if that's more the case here. But West Virginia has won 2 in a row. They've won 3 out of the last 4, and they, as I mentioned earlier, these two teams haven't been playing for a long time, just a little over a decade, but West Virginia does own an 8-4 overall head-to-head lead here with 3 out of those last 4. So they did win at one point 3 in a row, 2016, 17, 18. That was, again, what I referred to with the struggles of obviously Baylor turning over to a new chapter and bringing in Matt Rule, and you had Jim Grobe in there as well, I guess, in 2016. So, this has been a pretty even series, although West Virginia has had the upper hand here as of late. So that's something that Baylor will look to try and, correct just in general, but certainly that first ever win in Morgantown would be a big feather in the cap of this program and a massive accomplishment because, again, no one's done it before. So that's definitely one of the biggest goals, I think, of this weekend is to not only get a win, that's first and foremost, but, to check another box and make a little history of your own when given the opportunity to do so. So that's in front of them this weekend. But I guess just in general on the Baylor football front, before we look at West Virginia too much, Sawyer Robertson apparently is all good. Dave Aranda mentioning that although he was seen in a walking boot after their win over TCU, that he is A-okay and should be just fine as far as this Saturday goes. So that's good news. Anything else health-related on your radar here? And also, obviously, any thoughts on Sawyer Robertson? And I don't know that there was really much doubt, but there was a little bit of a scare when you had the word out there that he was in a walking boot, so it's good to have some clarification there.
Right, and it seemed like that was all just precautionary. Just that's what it seems like, and what I'm probably going to chalk it up to at this point. Dave Aranda did say this is the healthiest that they're going to be and will have been all season long, so I take that to mean some good things. I'm curious if they get some guys back. You know, we haven't seen Kendrick Simpkins in a while. We haven't seen Jacquez Evans in a while playing any meaningful snaps. So I'm curious if that shifts this week. And then also just curious kind of in general on, you know, as far as Baylor goes, just health and, you know, not just like our guys playing, but also how healthy are they? So like Cooper Lands, is he going to completely turn the corner? We saw him play one of his best games of the year against TCU. You know, how healthy is he now at this point in the year? That's going to mean a lot. You know, everybody's going to be banged up, but how banged up are you is a big question that I think everyone has. And so, yeah, very, very curious to see kind of how that goes. Outside of that, you know, Aranda didn't mention a ton, just outside of just typical coach speak type things, talking about West Virginia, was very complimentary of them, talked about the things they were working on, specifically tackling, specifically becoming more consistent in pass coverage. Those were some things they worked on over the bye week. Also mentioned some guys, kind of singled him out, like Michael Trigg, kind of the big performances he sees coming for him. Mentioned KT Thomas as well, the kind of energy that he brings on the defensive side. So those were some of the main takeaways. And then, of course, Dominic Richardson no longer being with the team was kind of the headliner.
Yeah, that was one note from Dave Aranda's press conference, roster-wise. Dominic Richardson moving on, going to save his red shirt, and that makes a lot of sense for him. He was really just not at all in the picture at this point. I mean, he's been a non-factor this year. I'm a cut to the chase guy, so that's not to be mean, like, whatever, but like he wasn't a factor, like in any way, shape, or form in this.
And he wasn't going to be.
No,
yeah.
So, like, I mean, I heard that news, and I guess in some situations you'd be like, oh, man, wow. But it's like, as soon as I heard that, I was like, okay, yeah. So, anyways, and it's nothing against Dominic. Obviously, thought when he came over from Oklahoma State he'd have a bigger role. He did. At times, they tried to give him a bigger role last year, and, like, nothing worked for anybody last year. It was an awful experience for all involved. I'm sure there were some guys who walked away with some great memories and great friendships and all that, but from a viewing perspective, we know last year was a really tough pill to swallow, and the on-field play wasn't that great, and he just never seemed to really be healthy or find a role. And then this year he's been, I guess, banged up again, but clearly Bryson Washington is the leader in the room now, and Dawson Pendergrass is like the next up, and then Richard Reese has his few carries here and there. But, yeah, there was just – Richardson wasn't in the game plan.
Right, so big thing with him that I just want to hit on really quick. He was the RB2 coming into the year, but he kept dealing with injuries all through fall camp, and that gave Dawson Pendergrass an opportunity to kind of rise up, and he has. He's played really well, and then Richard Reese continues when he's been given opportunities to play pretty well also. And so then you look forward to, oh, now he's healthy, and it's like, well, there's no playing time available. And so then you kind of look forward, and it's like, well, you know, Dominic Richardson has an opportunity here to redshirt and then potentially transfer, stay at Baylor. But it's like, for Baylor's side of things, I mean, they're about to get Caden Knighton and Michael Turner coming in next year, who are both four-star guys. And so it's like, you don't really have a reason to keep a redshirt senior who is probably going to still be your third or fourth running back next year. So I think this gives Dom an opportunity to go transfer somewhere, play out his final year of eligibility. And I hope he does really well. But I think this is kind of a good thing for both sides.
Yeah, I mean, really not too big of a deal, I think, for either one. I mean, certainly you wish it would have worked out differently, but 31 carries, 109 yards, and that was, you know, now it will be the lowest total of his entire career in college of his 5 years. That is his lowest output since his freshman season, and that was 13 more carries for 100-plus more yards and 3 touchdowns. So he's clearly not going to carve out much of a role this year, and so he'll go save up that year and go elsewhere, and good for him and good luck wherever that may be.
And unfortunately, his biggest moment of the year is going to be the Colorado fumble at the 1-yard line, in which Baylor was trying to tie the game. And that's really unfortunate that that's kind of basically the last real snaps that we got from him during his Baylor career.
Well, I was going to avoid that, but thank you, Grayson, for
You're
bringing
welcome.
up that moment for him. But no,
Everyone's thinking it.
Good luck to Dominic Richardson in all seriousness, and hope he lands on his feet somewhere and finds some playing time. But, yeah, that was of note this past week. So there is a scholarship to now work with for the Bears, and we'll see what they do with that. But you feel pretty good about the running back room at this stage. I had this question. I don't know. This is completely out of the blue just because eligibility. I mean, we got Diego Pavia, who's now suing the NCAA to basically try to get rid of eligibility, which is that's something where I'll be out on college football. I'll tell you right now. If we got guys hanging around for Alan Bowman 15 years and Cam Risings to take over the sport, I have so little interest in that. I want to see the turnover every couple of years. I want to see new guys. That's the point of college football is to not have a 15-year quarterback,
right?
But there's some that want to go in that direction. I'll just say I'd be completely out on that. But my point being that you got all these guys that are hanging around because none of us know how many years anybody has left because of the COVID year. Is there any way Daquan Finn can redshirt this year or save a year?
So I think we're past the redshirt period.
Not to say at Baylor, mind you, but
I think it'd have to be medical. If it's medical and you
he
don't
is hurt.
Right. So if it's medical and you don't play 4 games, then yeah, because that's always been a thing though, right? If you don't play in 4 games and you get injured and then you got to put in a waiver and go through that process. So I would say this, I guess it's possible. I don't know how likely it is, but yeah, it's possible.
Yeah, I wondered
because he already got his COVID year. He already used that.
But we got guys playing 7-8 years, so he's played in 3 games and he's had this lingering injury and has not been available. It's been very strange.
Yeah, it has.
And I just started to wonder about that now when I saw Dominic Richardson going, I'm going to save my red shirt. And I was like, the Daquan Finn injury is kind of strange. So,
well, just to be clear on that, Dom never used even a red shirt year, so he was just a 4-year
Oh, I know.
senior.
I'm just saying it kicked into my head that guys are starting to worry about their red shirts. And so that's what made me think of, hey, Dominic Richardson making that choice. Daquan Finn hasn't really played that much lately. And I guess if you're hurt, you could apply for a medical red shirt and then go play, somewhere else again next year. But that's something I was wondering about. I don't know how much that's been kicked around, especially when you realize how fragile their backup situation is.
You would hope that Finn would be able to play in case they needed him, but that hasn't been the case over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, so that's something I'm curious about, I guess, as we move forward here. So anything else from Dave Aranda that you found of interest, or just want to get into West Virginia here?
Yeah, let's just dive into West Virginia. He pretty much talked about West Virginia for a large chunk of the press conference.
Well, West Virginia right now is sitting at 6th in the Big 12 standings. You got Baylor sitting at 9th. West Virginia at 4-2 in the Big 12 and 5-4 overall. They're looking to get to a bowl game. Baylor's looking to get to a bowl game. Winner of this game will get to a bowl game. Baylor also 5-4 overall, but game back in the Big 12 at 3-3. But Baylor could do some standings jumping because Texas Tech's off this week. They're 4-3. So if you were to win, which you've never again done in Morgantown, West Virginia before, so that's the first thing, and that will prove to be the most difficult thing. But let's say that you did, you would hop over Texas Tech. You would hop over TCU because they have the same record. You've beaten both, and they're both off this week, so they can't stay ahead of you. And then you'd obviously hop over West Virginia because they'd also now be 4-3, and you'd also have them head-to-head as well. So you could seemingly jump all the way up to 6th, and then maybe even be in a tie depending on what happens with Arizona State, Iowa State, Kansas State. I mean, you're right there in the mix with them if you win, mind you. But I just thought that was kind of interesting to look at that, for sure you jump up 3 spots, but possibly even get into like a tangle for 3rd place if things worked out a certain way for Baylor, which is kind of crazy to think about given how you started 0-3 in the Big 12.
Right, and I mean, the weirdness to this is that Baylor's lost to, like you mentioned, if Baylor jumped to 6, they would have lost to 3 of the teams that would be above them inside that top 5 group. So, even if Baylor won out the rest of this season, it's hard to find a path for them to, I mean, it's not impossible for them to make the Big 12 championship, but it's basically impossible because they've lost to all those teams ahead of them. So that's kind of the unfortunate part there. But yeah, I mean, they got something to play for, try to move up in the standings, try to get to a better bowl game. And of course, ride some momentum here is the biggest thing. And honestly, I think a lot of people are talking about, look at how well Kansas is playing. Look at how well BYU is playing. Look at how well Colorado is playing. And I'm like, well, Baylor's been playing pretty well. I mean, Baylor's won 3 games in a row now and seem to be on a bit of a roll right now. And so I'm just kind of curious how the rest of the season plays out, as I do believe Baylor's kind of playing like a top 5 or 6 team in the league at this very moment.
If West Virginia does win this game, Baylor would not jump up over them. They'll jump up, potentially over some others with wins. But this is the week where they could really, make that move. Maybe in the last couple weeks they could do some damage as well. But then you'd find yourself at 3-4 again, and then it would just kind of be hard to do too much in terms of working up. So this is really their week where they could make kind of a leap up. But, yeah, not to Arlington. That's technically not at 0, but it basically is, and I'm not entertaining that idea whatsoever. That's not going to happen. But, just in terms of where you fall in the standings, it is a lot different looking when you're analyzing the season to finish near the top as opposed to middle to the bottom, which is basically where they've resided this entire year, given that 0-3 start. But for West Virginia, I mean, with the loss, they fall back towards the middle. They'd get hopped over by Baylor, for example. But with a win, they'd be 5-2 and technically right there in the mix, although needing some help in the Big 12 title race. But they'd find themselves just in that 3rd spot, which is where they are right now with the cluster of Iowa State, Arizona State, Kansas State, all at 4-2. And then, of course, BYU, who is just very fortunate to be where they are this week after what we saw on Saturday, and then Colorado at number 2 there at 5-1. So West Virginia technically not out of it, but obviously just trying to win as many games as possible to save their head coach, Neil Brown, who has competed with Dave Aranda for the hottest seat in the Big 12 for the majority of the offseason and a good part of this season as well, although with Aranda that's cooled off, and with Brown, it's been kind of like a light switch off and on. We know at the Aranda, all it takes is losing again, and the talk will return to, what it was, but he's at least been able to cool that off. Brown is still pretty hot, but again, they could be 5-2 in the Big 12 with the win. And you look at their schedule, they lost to Penn State, who's very good and a top 5 team, top 10 team, depending on who you ask in the country. Beat Albany, that's a paycheck game. Turn around and lost to Pittsburgh, who has started to even out, but they started off the season as one of the better stories, very lucky teams in the country. They definitely won some close games there early on, including that West Virginia game that West Virginia should have won. So they were at 1-2, won their next 2, beat KU and Oklahoma State, and then lost to Iowa State and Kansas State before another 2-game back-to-back little win bunch with now road trips to Arizona and Cincinnati. They beat Arizona on the road by 5. They beat Cincinnati on the road by 7 last week, and that's where we last saw them. Nico Marchiol, their young quarterback, has started the past couple of games as Garrett Green, their usual quarterback, one has been banged up and injured. There's no definitive word on his status. You could possibly see him this weekend. You might not. But they've won 2 in a row, so they're back to feeling okay about things. Although, like with Baylor, all it takes is a loss to Baylor or the next loss, and everybody will be back to fire Neil Brown. So they've been kind of a weird team where they've lost to some good teams. They're right there in the mix. They've dealt with some health, obviously, but there's been some promising things like getting the young quarterback out there a little bit. But just kind of what is your overall opinion of West Virginia and everything you know about them?
Right. So I think they kind of got unlucky with their non-conference, obviously. I mean, having to play Penn State and then a rivalry game against Pittsburgh is always pretty difficult. So they start 1-2, and that's tough. But then you look at their conference schedule, and it's very much evened out. They haven't had to play Colorado. They haven't had to play BYU, haven't had to play Arizona State. So that's definitely helped them. And, they were kind of going through that stretch where they were struggling and, we're 3-4 on the season. And then they get Arizona, who is playing like pretty much the worst team in the Big 12. They might be the worst team in the Big 12. We'll see against Houston.
Oklahoma State's pretty bad.
Yeah, they're kind of fighting for the bottom there, so they kind of had a get-right game, barely won that game. And then against Cincinnati this weekend, I was not very impressed by what West Virginia did in that game. Parker Fleming on Twitter, he puts out a graphic that are kind of like, how bad did you get beaten? And the West Virginia-Cincinnati game was basically the most lopsided win of the weekend. So meaning Cincinnati outperformed West Virginia pretty much in every way, and specifically in success rate. And West Virginia still won the game because they had 2 defensive touchdowns and scored 17 points off turnovers. So it wasn't impressive, but it's a win, right? And so now they're 5-4, 4-2. They get to come home, and the big thing for West Virginia here is, they play UCF and Texas Tech to finish the season. If they beat Baylor, there is a path for them to win out, go 8-4, and then be 7-2 in the Big 12. And then it's kind of one of those things where tiebreakers will probably be the deciding factor in who gets into the Big 12 championship. So they're still playing for a lot right now.
Yeah, they are. It also feels like they're setting themselves up for fool's gold, where they're going to be just good enough to have to retain Neil Brown versus having the ability to just go all right, clearly this is the end of the road. Now, if you lose to Baylor, then maybe not. Maybe you start a slide that gets you to where you're finally able to make that call, but they're in that weird purgatory that Baylor fans have seemingly wanted to find themselves in, of with Dave Aranda, of just, is it good enough? Is it not good enough? How long does this go on? With Neil Brown, it feels like he can't get over that hump. Dave Aranda's already won the Big 12. He's won a Sugar Bowl. But Neil Brown hasn't played for a Big 12 title yet. It seems like another year where if things go right, they could get close, but not close enough. So just close enough to piss you off, basically. It's kind of what his tenure is. Yeah. Or they're going to slide and then be bad, and then it'll be all right, is it time now? Now do we finally make the move? But it's just very contentious. This is the same program that a month ago was talking about flying the airplane over this, the city and having the Fire Neil Brown banner. And then you had the other side that was putting up, I guess the plane got canceled. The plane company wouldn't do it. So then the same group that was behind Fire Neil Brown went and put up the billboards. And then the other group countered with the, no, we like Neil Brown billboards. So that's sort of where they find, they're good, but they're not good, is what I'm trying to say. They're good enough to beat you if you're not careful, but they're also easy to pick off at the same time. So who the heck knows which version shows up? But yeah, they could easily have been beaten by Cincinnati last weekend, and we're talking about a 4-3 team that feels a lot different. But
right. And this line opened as a Baylor 1.5 point favorite, and it's grown to 2.5 now. So, being a favorite on the road in the Big 12 is kind of a sign that Vegas doesn't really believe in what West Virginia has done so far this year really either, and that 5-4 record is maybe a little misleading.
Yeah, so they have had Nico Marchiol at quarterback. I mentioned Garrett Green's been banged up, and he might be available this weekend. We don't know as of right now. But Nico Marchiol last week against Cincinnati, 9 of 15 for 156, a touchdown and an interception. The week before, 18 of 22, 198, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He has ran a little bit, had a touchdown last week, 18 yards rushing. And the week prior, what was his best game against Arizona, when he also threw for nearly 200, 2 TDs, no interceptions. He also ran for 39 yards. So those are the stats we've seen the last couple weeks. He got a little bit of time against Kansas State as well, but not a ton there. So any thoughts on Nico Marchiol or Garrett Green, or does it matter, or just how do you view the quarterback spot for the Mountaineers this week against Baylor's defense, which has been pretty good against the run, not great against the pass, pretty stout in general, but not great in any way. They can be gotten, as we've seen. They can also give teams fits offensively. What do you feel like stands out about West Virginia, and does it matter which quarterback plays this weekend in terms of Baylor's odds?
So for me, I think that if I was Dave Aranda coming up with this scheme, I would much rather face Nico Marchiol. And I know that this has kind of been a hotly debated topic for, I think, West Virginia fans, because I think a lot of people are thinking that Nico is better than Garrett Green. They're 3-0 with him, so it's kind of like, oh, ride the hot hand. But I haven't really been impressed with anything that I've seen from him so far, just in his play. He's been more of a game manager, and the problem is I don't think their defense is good enough to where you can just have a game manager at quarterback win you very many games. And yeah, they've won their last 2. I think the Cincy game was a bit of a fluke, and I think Arizona is pretty terrible. And so that's kind of where you got to find some middle ground there. But Garrett Green scares me a whole lot more. Baylor hasn't faced very many running quarterbacks, and definitely not running quarterbacks with Garrett Green's level of mobility. And that's a little terrifying. I mean, if Baylor just doesn't game plan for that very well and he's able to get loose and run for, 75 yards, it can completely flip this game. I know West Virginia fans haven't really liked what they've seen from Garrett Green. I understand that. He's not avoiding sacks very well. His throws of 20-plus yards down the field has been the biggest thing, though, for them. He is just really struggling in that area, and as a team, they're struggling, whereas last year, he was so good in that area. It really was the thing that they just kept hitting on. He had 12 touchdowns and just 3 interceptions last year on 20-plus yard throws. This year, he and Markiel are combined 518 yards with just 2 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. So they've been absolutely dreadful in that area that this offense really relies on. They rely on running the football and then taking shots over the top, and they haven't been able to hit on those. But I think Green gives them more upside in that area and then more upside as a runner. Markiel is just more of a game manager. So I think it kind of comes down to, what do you think the flow of this game is? Are you looking for, a quarterback who's not going to make as many mistakes, or are you looking for a quarterback that can actually go out there and, win a football game for you? I think that's kind of the dilemma that West Virginia is probably going to be facing.
Yeah, and the thing with West Virginia and Nico Marchiol is kind of like what I was referring to with the blimps and the airplane flyovers, or I should say the billboards, not the blimps, and the airplane flyovers, is that I think West Virginia fans are demanding and wanting something more, and they don't quite know what that is. They just know that they don't necessarily like what they see now, and they're kind of tired of it. So Garrett Green can be a pretty good quarterback, but it's just kind of like he's been the kind of standard now for a while, and they want to see the young, hot recruit that has been brewing for a couple of years. And so Garrett Green's injury opened the door to where, hey, we're unhappy. We want billboards saying fire the coach, but hey, we'll take the quarterback change for right now and see if that makes a difference. And they won a couple games, and it's the young guy. And so even though he hasn't been all that impressive, like, they're winning, and it's something new and something different. Like, I think that's where they are. They just need to see something. Like, remember when Baylor was just like, we were just like, just put a different quarterback in. Like, just do something to make it interesting. This is injury related. But I do think Markiel is at least giving them, is a little snack to chew on. But, yeah, I think if Garrett Green's healthy, he's a better choice. He's more proven. Even though he hasn't had a great year, I do think I'd be much more scared of him in this situation than I would be of Nico Markiel. I think you can get to him and rattle him a little bit and game plan against him a lot better than a guy who's seen as much football as Garrett Green has. So we'll see on that front who is available, but it has been Markiel the last couple of games for the Mountaineers, and that Green is not that far off from possibly being available as well. So that won't be a curveball if, in fact, he trots out there. And he is their second leading rusher. Jaheim White should be familiar to most people. He is their leader on the ground. C.J. Donaldson as well has been around pretty long time now at this point. Never quite broken out like I think everybody's sort of, at least like I did when I first saw him a couple years back. I felt like he was going to be a guy that really burst onto the scene, but I think he's been injured quite a bit, and they've obviously had some ups and downs. But you got Donaldson, you got Jaheim White, and Garrett Green, if he's available, can run it a little bit as well. Markiel can use his legs, just not to the killer extent that we've seen so far. At receiver, you got Hudson Clement's a really good player, Traylon Ray, Cole Taylor. Those are their main 3 guys. Rodney Gallagher as well as Justin Robinson, their top 5. But you've got Jaden Bray, should be a name familiar to a lot of people. Jaheim White, again, a running back, also catching some passes out of the backfield on occasion. So anything stand out to you from the weaponry that Garrett Green or Nico Markiel will have at their disposal this weekend? Right.
So a couple things I think on the guys at receiver. Hudson Clement has actually been out for a couple weeks, and he's questionable for this game. He's actually, I think Neil Brown said he's running for the first time this week, in a while. And so I'm very curious if they rush him back, and he's been their best receiver, I think, by a lot when he's played. He just has missed, a game or two here and there. Traylon Ray is kind of their big play threat. He's got 404 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jaden Bray is also out this week, so it's like they are just banged up at wide receiver. So really the main guys, I would say, for them at wide receiver are Traylon Ray and then Cole Taylor, their tight end. And Taylor beat up Baylor a little bit last year, and he's just a very reliable option for them at tight end. He can move the chains, and he'll hurt you over the middle of the field, which Baylor has struggled at defending so far this year. You mentioned Jaheim White. There's got to be something going on with C.J. Donaldson because he's not getting the kind of carries that he was getting early in the season. So not sure exactly what's going on with him. There wasn't like an update by Neil Brown, but I think he only had 4 carries against Cincinnati. So if they don't have him and it's just Jaheim White, Jaheim's really good, but I also think you saw the game against Cincinnati and they only ran for 92 yards against Cincy. And Baylor's run defense is very comparable to what Cincy is bringing in that regard. So that was a little bit alarming to me. And I think part of that is when you don't have Garrett Green as an option to run the football and Nico's not as mobile, not as scary running the football, I think that takes away some of their ability to run the football, which is their bread and butter in this offense. So I'm very curious to see how Baylor kind of matches that and how they game plan for that if it is Nico out there. Because my guess is they probably would just say, okay, we're going to take away the run game and force Nico to beat them consistently through the air and see if they can maybe create some turnovers or things like that. But this is a banged up West Virginia, offense. Their weapons seem to be banged up. Obviously, the quarterback position is up in the air, and they're coming off a performance where they only had 248 yards of total offense against Cincinnati. Not great. Not great against the Cincinnati defense that at times has hemorrhaged points and hemorrhaged yards.
Hudson Clement ran off to the side. That was the latest update from Neil Brown. They're hopeful that he can be back. Garrett Green is back at practice and going through some repetitions. So while he has continued to be banged up, they're looking at what he can do in full-on practice. Clement, game-time decision as well. I think also, who else did he mention?
Jaden Bray out.
Yeah, Jaden Bray is also looking like he could be available for Baylor. So
a starting safety and a starting cornerback are both out.
Yeah, Aiden Garnes and Aubrey Burks are out on the defensive side. So that's the latest update on some of what West Virginia has going on. So some of their better players statistically and just without needing the numbers to look at it, Hudson Clement's pretty obvious when you've watched West Virginia that he's one of their better players. Garrett Green, same thing. C.J. Donaldson, same thing. So whatever their status is, those are some game time decisions, it looks like, which I don't think flips the game necessarily in a major way. Like if all of a sudden those guys are playing, you're like, oh my God, they can't win this game. But it certainly does change sort of the perception of what you're going up against. Because if there is no Donaldson and no Green and it's just Marchiol and Bray's out and Clement is out, then I think you're feeling pretty okay about that matchup if you're the Bears. But we'll see, because obviously those guys are either questionable or his game's been shipping a little bit, and that's just part of the deal.
And this was the first day for 11-on-11 work for Garrett Green. So that's huge, right? He's just been doing 7-on-7. So I think they're kind of waiting and seeing how his body reacts to this next week. They have a couple more games on their schedule, so maybe they hold him out this week and try to get him healthier. But, we'll see. I do think that he changes the math a little bit, especially in the run game. And so that's why I just view him as kind of a little bit of a difference maker if he does play and is actually fully healthy.
Meanwhile, defensively, West Virginia, not the greatest. They are lower in the Big 12 statistically in most categories, giving up a lot of yards, nearly 400 per game. Now, the minimum's 300 per game. So, I don't know the yardage. I know, like, Phil Bennett, our buddy that joins us each week, has always been against the total yards being all that important, because really it's just about points. It's about what points you give up ultimately in turnovers and those types of things. But West Virginia does rank amongst the lowest teams when it comes to total yards per game. So Baylor should be able to move the football pretty effectively again, especially in the passing game, where West Virginia is one of the worst in the league. They're a lot better against the run in terms of what they give up. That secondary in particular is the area where I think everybody's kind of focused and locked in on them when you look at what you could potentially take advantage of when it comes to points per game. They're in the lower tier of the league as well. So, there's some weaknesses on this West Virginia defense.
Yeah, I was going to say, Phil Bennett may say it's okay to give up yards, but they're also in the bottom 4 in scoring defense. Like you mentioned, they have the worst opponent third down conversion defense in the league. They give up a first down on 45% of opponents' third downs. That's really bad. And then also you kind of look at just their pass defense in general. You mentioned that. They're going to hemorrhage yards there to pretty much everyone. They have the second worst pass defense in the Big 12, only ahead of Texas Tech, and they have the worst pass efficiency defense in the league. This is a bad defense. I mean, they give up 28 points per game as well. Like I said, that's in the bottom 4 of the conference. I think in general, it's just one of those things where I think the thing that they do well is they create a little bit of havoc. They're a little bit better at getting sacks, a little bit better at getting tackles for loss than a team like Texas Tech or a team like Oklahoma State. But the problem is, and it flipped against Cincinnati, so we'll see if it becomes a trend now that they have a new defensive coordinator, but they're outside the top 100 in turnover margin in the entire nation, so they haven't really done a great job in that area of forcing turnovers, and then, of course, their offense has turned it over quite a bit as well. So if they can flip that area, obviously that gives you some turnover luck, and then maybe you can flip some games, and that's basically how they won the game against Cincinnati. So if Baylor can take care of the football, I look at this game and I think, it's going to be really hard for West Virginia to keep Baylor from scoring 30-plus points in this game, unless, again, they get a bunch of turnovers.
Yeah, and they have, as you mentioned, the defensive coordinator made a change recently. They got away from Jordan Leslie, who has since, unfortunately, been arrested and has a whole slew of things going on, but they had canned him because of the struggles early on in the season, particularly with the pass defense, and they made the move to Jeff Kuhn, so we'll see how much of a difference that makes. But they did have to make a change already this season because the defense was struggling on the back end so mightily. So that does seem like an area where Sawyer Robertson can throw it around a little bit, and the Baylor receivers can hopefully make some yards after catch and make some explosive plays. But we've seen a lot of the run game from Baylor as well here of late. So I'm curious to just kind of see the rhythm of the offense and how they look, because a week off was probably a blessing in some ways, but I can bet there's probably some part of them that's like, hey, let's keep playing. And we've kind of had that conversation of you're in a situation where you're riding a lot of momentum. You're just week by week seemingly building blocks on offense and improving, and then all of a sudden you have this interruption. So maybe you need to shake a little bit of rust off early, but should be able to whip the ball around, and hopefully that opens things up to get back to that run game and continue building off the great success we've seen these last couple of weeks.
Definitely. And so just a few stats on, Baylor's end of things really quick before we move on from West Virginia. Sawyer Robertson currently has the 6th highest QBR in all of college football. That's pretty crazy to think about. I mean, he is playing at a very high level, and now he gets to go face one of the worst pass defenses in the Big 12. I mean, that bodes really well for Baylor moving the football through the air. I mean, they have so many different weapons, and it's going to be really hard for West Virginia to find a way to lock down all of the weapons that Baylor has. I mean, 4 times this year, Baylor's had a different wide receiver lead them in receiving. So, again, clearly you can't just focus on one guy. You're going to have to focus on a variety of guys and try to figure out a way to slow them down. Of course, over the last 3 games, Baylor is averaging 250 yards rushing per game, and I know a lot of people are going to talk about West Virginia's got a top 4 run defense in the Big 12, and that's fine. But I think at the level that Baylor is operating, you got to look at more specific games that West Virginia has played in my eyes. Who are the teams that are most similar to Baylor as far as their success running the football? And if you look at those type of teams, it's Penn State, 222 yards. It's Kansas, 247 yards rushing. It's Cincinnati, 157 yards rushing. But if you get rid of the 3 sacks that they actually had 185 yards on the ground. And then you look at Kansas State, which I know a lot of people will point at and say, well, Kansas State only ran for 114 yards in that game. And I would push back and say, yeah, they only ran for 114 yards, but they averaged 4.5 yards per carry, and they scored 45 points. So they just kind of pick and chose, what was going to be successful for them, and they just kept throwing the ball repeatedly and moving the football while also getting 4.5 yards every time they hand the ball off. And so I think that their run defense is a little misleading. I think that Baylor should be able to run this ball for at least 150 yards in this game. And if they do that, I mean, again, it's going to be really hard for West Virginia to keep Baylor from scoring 30-plus points unless they force multiple turnovers.
So Baylor, West Virginia, battle of 5 and 4 teams. West Virginia 4 and 2 in the league. Baylor 3 and 3 in the league. And as I mentioned, with TCU and Tech off this week, a win, they'd vault 3 spots but you lose and you're back to under 500 in the Big 12 and at 500, and then all of a sudden need to win one of your last two. Let's not forget the bowl stakes here. You need a win, and I think the sooner you get that, the better, because I'd rather focus on can you win 7 or 8 rather than you got 3 games to win 6. You got 2 games to win 6. Oh, my God, you have to win this game or the season's over with. Like, That's what you want to avoid. So, hey, go make a little history, be the first team ever to win in Morgantown and also get bowl eligible, and then let's party these last couple of weeks and play with house money. That's how I would be viewing it. But we'll see. They're 1.5-point favorites to open, now 2.5-point favorites, that being the Bears on the road in Morgantown. So what does that tell you? It tells you that Vegas likes what they've seen. Not that it's a guarantee by any means, because after all, they're just wanting to take your money. But I think that says a lot that they're favored, and it's actually grown since it opened. Just, where these two teams kind of are. I do like Baylor. I like their chances a lot in this situation to go up to Morgantown and maybe make some history. But Saturday at 3 o'clock, we'll get back to that a little bit later on. Meanwhile, basketball, the Baylor men now 1-1. Got their tails absolutely kicked every which way from Sunday. We touched on that towards the end of last week's episode as basketball season got underway. Gonzaga absolutely demolished them. And then they turned around and played Arkansas on Saturday in what was a highly competitive game with a pretty good team led now by John Calipari and the SEC. As much as it just gets nauseating hearing about them in football, guess what? You get to start hearing about it in basketball as well. As by some metrics, they're the best league in the country from a depth standpoint, and maybe even the top of the heap standpoint. We'll see as the season plays out. But the number 16 Razorbacks, American Airlines Arena in Dallas, and the Bears go out and rebound in a big way, 72-67. They win as they are now 1-1 and get that neutral site win. They'll turn around and play later on tonight now here at the Foster Pavilion against Sam Houston. Will also be back at Foster on Sunday against Tarleton, so should be 3-1 at the end of the week. A couple games to kind of ease back into the just mode of the regular season, because starting off with 6-16 is a pretty tough way to begin things. So 1-1, and now Sam Houston tonight. Your thoughts on the Baylor men's basketball team entering week 2?
So quickly, what to expect this week. Sam Houston has a loss to Nevada by 15 points, and then they beat Tarleton State by 30. So Sam Houston's the bigger test this week as far as that goes. Baylor, I think, is a 15-point favorite. I think a 20-point win is a solid outing. That's kind of how good Sam Houston has been, and then they should show up and pretty much name the score against Tarleton State this week. Now, as far as what we saw this past week, losing to Gonzaga, not great, but I would also say that was clearly a home game for Gonzaga. It's a shame that is going to be listed as a neutral site game. I mean, they literally had a student section at that game. That's pretty insane. And Baylor showed up and faced a team that returned 10 guys that were on a Sweet 16 team from a year ago, and then they just added 2 more guys who are in their top 8 from the transfer portal. So that is a very good team. They are much closer to a finished product than Baylor is. And I think you kind of saw that even out against Arkansas, where Arkansas is kind of in the same boat as Baylor, right? You're bringing in a bunch of new players. Now, Arkansas is also bringing in a new coach in John Calipari, but you're seeing, they have a superstar freshman. They have a bunch of transfers that came in. And so this was a game more of 2 teams that are kind of unfinished, right? And are going to get better, you would think, throughout the season. And Baylor found a way to win it. And I think there's a couple things that really stood out to me about this one. The first one is Norchad Omier. I think he's going to be this team's unquestioned best player all year long and their most valuable player. They simply are not the same team when he comes off the court, and they don't have much depth behind him. And so he's going to have to stay out of foul trouble. He's going to have to, pick and choose his spots when he tries to block shots and when he tries to barrel to the rim. But in general, I was so impressed by him. I mean, they were feeding him late in the game, and he was going and getting buckets in the post. He's a very, very good player on both ends of the court. You got to see the flashes of VJ Edgecombe, and I know people are going to look at the 3 for 12 shooting and the 1 for 7 from 3. But if you watch that game, you could clearly tell the impact that VJ had. I mean, 11 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists. That doesn't even tell the whole story. He had the biggest rebounded the game, and then he made 2 clutch free throws to ice the game. The guy's just a winner, and I think he's ultimately going to get better and better as the season progresses. And then, of course, you got to see a good performance from Jaden Nunn. You saw Jeremy Roach, kind of what he did in closing time of that game as well, saw his veteran leadership. And then the kind of, I don't want to say the story of the week, but maybe the surprises of the week to people who maybe don't follow the basketball program that closely. True freshman Rob Wright, 2 very solid games against Gonzaga and Arkansas, and I think he's going to be a big factor for this team off the bench. And then I'll also mention Langston Love still has not played for this team, and as we know, he's one of the best 6 men in the country. And so I do want to add that clarification, too, to the fact that they lost to Gonzaga, and then this game against Arkansas, Baylor's just going to get better with the addition of him.
So that's where the Baylor men find themselves 1 week into play here. Meanwhile, the women also at 1-1 beat Incarnate Word, blew them out 85-33 in the opener last Thursday, which was all well and good, but then turned around and had to travel up to Oregon on Sunday for a big matchup. And after a flurry there at the end, made it a close game and nearly walked away with a massive upset, but instead fell just short, 76-74. Ducks get the win. Heartbreaker there for the Baylor women. They will now have a couple days off. They will be back on Thursday. They'll play East Texas A&M. Is that Texas A&M Commerce? Did they change their name?
Yeah, they changed that last week.
Oh, okay.
Last week?
Yeah, it was like last week.
So they literally just happened.
Literally just changed it.
Okay. East Texas A&M. I've never seen that, so I just missed that last week. But last week was weird, though. We were in and out. It was like a half week kind of weird with everything. Because Midway played like on a Thursday and all that. So, yeah, I missed that. But East Texas A&M, that's interesting. The more you know. So, yeah, they will play East Texas A&M coming up on Thursday, and then they'll get Texas A&M Corpus Christi on Sunday. But the big unfortunate news is obviously Jana Van Geitenbeek injuring herself. I don't know if that's the proper way to getting injured. In their last outing, and it looked bad at the time, and comes back that she is out for the season with an injury suffered in their last contest, a torn ACL, which was what the fears were, and she had a message saying that she had torn the ACL, I guess it was in the opener, and they got the diagnosis back, and it's the last thing that you wanted to hear, so she put out a little note to thank everybody for their well wishes and to kind of just mention, the recovery process and how she's ready for it, and just a real positive kind of, typical, here's my graphic, here's my my pledge forward, I'm going to be positive and get better, and thanks for the well wishes, and all that kind of jazz, right, that you typically see. So that's just unfortunate that you prepare this entire offseason for this, and then right out of the gates, basically, you're injured and wiped out for an entire year. I mean, that's just brutal. She did say that you'll see her again in 25, 26, but, man, just a real blow. I mean, I know she's very popular. Her dad's very popular. Like, she's a great person in the program and for the university, and I don't even know what to say. Like, just to see the season start and to see her get injured so quickly just left me at a loss for words, really, and it's very unfortunate, and it's a blow. And we'll see how they react moving forward. But golly, like, how about some good luck? That'd be kind of nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I feel bad for her. Obviously, not ideal to lose someone, this early in the season to an injury like that. So hopefully she's able to recover and rebound and be ready for next season. I'll also mention, Bella Fauntleroy got hurt in the first couple minutes of this game against Oregon. So she only played 1 minute after having a really good performance in their first game. So that didn't help them on the road against Oregon either. They probably win that game if she's healthy throughout. I also want to mention, because I don't think we mentioned this when it happened, because I don't know how much of this had been announced, but Aliala Matharo from Florida, the Florida transfer, she was announced, I believe, a week or two ago that she's going to transfer to Baylor and be eligible for the second semester of the season. So that's something to keep an eye on. I mean, she averaged 19 points per game at Florida last year. So losing Van Geitenbeek, and then also, but then you have this kind of thing that's looming where you might get someone who averaged 19 points per game a season ago to come in and potentially replace her. That's big news, right? At least there's something coming that could help alleviate the loss, but still unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's a good move for depth. You always wonder how somebody's still available at this point, but there's always various reasons for why that could be. But, yeah, I mean, especially in light of that, although it was kind of to get depth, and then you now have lost the depth that you were supposed to gain. So I don't know that really worked out that well, but thank goodness you got her, right? Because otherwise you'd really be kind of up S Creek, if you will. So Van Geitenbeek does have a redshirt year. I guess that means we'll see her next season, but I know a long recovery awaits, and that's just, again, it's like getting ready for the first day of school and then you get strep throat or something, like it just, I mean, that's not a great example, but just you build up for some anticipation and then it just gets the rug pulled out from underneath you, and that was the case for her, and I hate that for anybody, so we'll see how that works out ultimately in the long run. But again, East Texas A&M coming up on Thursday, Texas A&M Corpus Christi coming up on Sunday, and they have a good slew of home games over the next couple of weeks. So plenty of opportunities to go see Nikki Collin and the Baylor women over at the Foster Pavilion. So there you go with that. Anything before we get into the mailbag here, Grayson?
I just want to mention really quick, I had a note on this earlier last week, and I'll also have more of an update on Sikkim 365 Premium for those who want to follow along. But Texas wide receiver Jonte Cook entered the transfer portal, or is going to enter the transfer portal. That was announced, I guess, a week ago, less than a week ago. And, this is a time where Baylor's so focused on the season, but you still have to keep an eye on the transfer portal and keep an eye on for, guys who enter to make sure, you're one of the first ones to be in contact with players like that. And of course, he can't actually enter the transfer portal until December 9th, which means he probably won't have an official decision until then. But just kind of what I know right now, many schools have reached out to him. I think there's been multiple reports about Oregon, multiple reports about Ole Miss, but he is definitely one to keep an eye on. As far as Baylor goes, there's definitely going to be a lot of communication there. I believe there's mutual interest there, and it's going to be something that I think a lot of people are going to have to keep an eye on over the next couple weeks here as Baylor tries to solidify their receiver room going into next year. We know they're going to heavily utilize the transfer portal, and Jonte Cook, the former 5-star prospect, could definitely be an option to add to the roster going into next year. We'll see how things play out. Obviously, the transfer portal is pretty unpredictable, and a lot of schools are going after him, but Baylor's doing, I think Baylor is a school that is definitely piquing his interest at the moment.
All right. He's a big name and a lot of promise when he went to Texas. Didn't really turn into much there. They have a great wide receiver room that played somewhat into it, but I'm sure he'll be a very popular name in the portal, and we'll see where that takes the Bears. All right, opening up the mailbag here. Did we have the question from last week? Did you happen to hold on to that? Remember that we didn't quite get to?
Let's get to it at the end. I'll find it. Yeah, I'll pull it up.
Clever username 99. Do you think having only 8 conference games with 3 cupcake games would help the perception of the Big 12? I'm just realizing this is the SEC model. No, because they would get knocked for that because the SEC acts and gets rewarded as though their 8 games are the same as other people's 9. So, no, it would just put them even farther behind the SEC in terms of perception because it would be looked at as though they play only 7 in a way. Like, their 9 only counts as 8, so their 8 would only count as 7. And so that wouldn't do you any good other than everybody would probably get an extra win. So there you see the genius behind the marketing of the SEC in some ways. No. Our 8 is your 9. We need this extra game that's for 99% of us an extra win rather than a conference game that's more of a toss-up. Hey, look at all these teams that are bowl eligible.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you play 4 non-conference games because we've all been brainwashed that your 8 is the same as 9. It's genius, like how they've just sort of manipulated things. And they have a point in some cases, like some schedules might be as tough, like their 8 are as tough, if not tougher than somebody's 9 in another league. It's not all of them, though. It's not all of them.
I mean, it's pretty simple to me. I mean, the answer is no to this question. Yeah. And the big thing for me is like, you're not going to change the perception of how much better SEC rosters are than Big 12 rosters. Like, you're not. I mean, look at the college football playoff committee and how they've ranked teams. Like, Miami was ranked ahead of BYU by like 5 spots. Miami hadn't beaten anybody and hadn't even looked impressive, but the perceived talent of the roster, and they have Cam Ward, and that offense is so good that they don't even care that that's one of the worst defenses in the country. And so I just think it's one of those things that perception is just going to be that those rosters are more talented, and obviously for the top half of the SEC, those rosters are more talented, like just kind of being honest.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean they're better. Like, you could still beat them for sure, but the top roster, those rosters are very talented. And so I think we just live in a world where that perception's never going to change. And so there's no point in scheduling another cupcake because that will be used against you, unlike it won't be used against an SEC team. Yeah,
so no, it makes no difference and doesn't do anything to go to 8 conference games, but appreciate the thought, clever username, and interesting question to start us off here. Alpha Needle, buy or sell? Spavital is no longer the OC in 2025, implies he takes a head coach or OC job at another school. I'll sell that. I think as of right now, I'd expect him back. I don't see a head coaching job out there unless he wants to start basically at the bottom of the totem pole at East Texas A&M or something. And as far as an OC goes, I mean, he's been good. I don't know that he's been so good that you're like worried about somebody bigger jumping in and taking him away from you at this point. So no, I would sell that. I think I would lean towards him being back.
I'm selling that. I think this was at minimum 2-year thing for Spav, and I think the big thing for him is that I think after next year, they're going to have a really good offense next year, assuming all the pieces stay in place and Sora Robertson returns. But I do think he'll get a head coaching job after next season. I think he's got an opportunity to get probably a similar level job to the one that he took with Texas State, but maybe more of an established program, hopefully, and he can have some success. But I don't think after this year.
Number 2, Bryson Washington will be the all-time lead running back in rushing yards in Baylor history when he ends his career at Baylor. I'm going to sell that. I don't think that he is going to break that mark based on what we've seen right now. He has not even crossed the 700-yard mark, I don't think, at this point in his career, and he would need like 4,000-plus yards, I think, to get to the rushing top of the list. So you're looking at averaging 1,000 per season for 4 years, and I just don't see that as being all that realistic at the moment, personally at least. So I'm going to sell that. And, yeah, I mean, 4,200 yards for Shock Linwood. He's at like probably 700-something right now, so absolutely not. I'll sell that.
I'm selling it as well, and I think the thing we need to remember is that, right now he's not having to split very many carries, and like Dawson comes in some, but I think in general he's kind of gotten the lion's share of handoffs in this offense. I think that changes next year. I think these guys that they're bringing in, you'll have Dawson back, and you'll also have guys like Caden Knighton, Michael Turner. You got Richard Reese still. Like, I think they're going to divvy out carries a little bit more next season, and so I think that'll take away from his overall numbers.
Yeah, and he doesn't even have 700. I was giving him like an extra 80 yards. He's got like 621, I think, total through 2 years. So yeah, I don't see any way that happens. Baylor runs the table and finishes the season 9-4. Including a bowl win. I'm going to sell this as well. I think it's certainly possible. I feel like they probably lose a game somewhere in here to close out the season. What would that be? 7 straight wins. I mean, it's doable, but I just wouldn't lean that way necessarily. So I'll sell that. But I think they can win they go like 5-1 down or 6-1 or something. But 7-0, I'm not quite ready to give them that just yet.
I'm going to sell it, but if you had put 8-5, I think I would have bought it. So we're just kind of one game off. I mean, Baylor's playing really well, and the end-of-season schedule is not that daunting.
No, but, you don't – I mean, man, I want to see them clinch a bowl game before we start talking too much about bowls. Like, I mean, it does feel like it should be almost a certainty, and it should be. Otherwise, I think obviously you're losing 3 straight to close the year.
Right.
Not making a bowl game. So I wish we could get that clinched in order to have the real conversation. Say, all right, they are playing in a bowl game. What's the final record look like? But, yeah, I'll sell that, but could get very close. And then the last one, Neil Brown is not the head coach for West Virginia in 2025. I'll sell that for right now. I think he's leaning on the side of being back, especially after a couple wins in a row. Doesn't take much to fire the plain banners back up. But I think right now he's okay. But I could change that opinion in a couple of weeks if they were to get beat by Baylor. And, that's the first time that's ever happened at home. And then all of a sudden you're now looking at 500 and, maybe it starts to get too hot again, but I'll sell it for now.
I'm selling it. I think they're going to get to a bowl game, and I think that's enough to keep him. Because even if they lose to Baylor, they still get UCF at home, and that feels like a game they should win. UCF has not.
UCF's gotten better the last couple weeks, but yeah.
They still keep losing, though, and so they might be able to compete. I'm not bought in on UCF actually being able to finish games, and then they also get Tech at the end of the year, and Tech just continues to lose games as well. So they have a lot of opportunities to try to get to a bowl game, and I think if they get there, he's good, so I'm going to sell it.
Yeah, all right, and then we go to, is that PED Bear? Jacked brother, PED Bear 1978, or Ped Bear. What is our backup quarterback? Oh, see, I touched on this earlier. What is our backup quarterback situation? Is Finn still hurt? Is he on board as a backup? It concerns me that our backup may be a freshman. I hope we never have to find out. Read my mind from earlier when I saw the Dominic Richardson redshirt story, and I was like, wait a second. Makes me think about DeQuan Finn, and he's played 6 years, but he's hurt, right? So he could technically maybe get a red shirt. I don't know exactly what his eligibility situation is. So what is the backup quarterback situation right now?
He'd have to apply for that because he's already used his normal red shirt year, unlike Dominic Richardson, and he's already used his COVID year. So that's where I'm having trouble finding eligibility for him. But guys have put in waivers for much less things. So I guess that's a possibility. And if that is so, then maybe he won't play. And I don't have an answer to that unless, Sawyer Robertson gets hurt, DeQuan Finn is completely dressed out, and then Nate Bennett comes into the game instead. So I guess right now, my answer to that would be that Nate Bennett's the backup because DeQuan Finn hasn't been dressing out for games. So I guess that's kind of where things are at right now until something changes.
Last we saw, Nate Bennett's the backup. Right. So that's all they have. And, yeah, you just have to cross your fingers and hope that Sawyer Robertson stays healthy, basically. If Finn's available, that's great. He came in, had the touchdown run, and then he's unavailable again the next week. It was like, practice, I guess, or whatever's lingering. I don't know. But, yeah, I just assume now Nate Bennett's the backup. And if we see DeQuan Finn out there dressed out, then great. But if not, then I don't know what the deal is there.
And to be clear, I do believe he is dealing with an injury. Right. I do. I don't think that he's not dealing with anything, which I think is what some people have been implying over the last couple weeks.
Oh, I don't know what other people have said. I haven't paid attention to anybody else. That just made sense in my head of like, we saw you play, you're healthy, and then all of a sudden you were unhealthy again. So like, is there a hope to gain another year somehow in there? But I don't question that he's been hurt. It's just
that's probably something that someone needs to ask at the press conference, like, who is your backup quarterback? Because especially if we don't have an answer this week, like if DeQuan Finn's not dressed out again, well, kind of what's going on would probably be a good question for Dave.
Wyatt Smith, do you think Keytron, now that he is back, will be more of an impact in the West Virginia game?
I do think so. I think last game he was basically out there kind of in case of emergency, and he actually had to come in and play a little bit, but didn't make much of an impact. He's been out for a little while. I hope they can get him kind of going, get him back healthy, because it's just another weapon in this offense. And as we've seen, going back to the Iowa State game, Ketron had an amazing performance in that game, and then we haven't seen a lot from him since, but you can kind of see what can happen if he, pops up, right? He could have a 6 for 80 type game and lead the team in receiving yards, and it's nice to have another option out there for Sawyer Robertson.
Seems to be a trend with players wanting to keep eligibility so they can play another year and transfer. Outside of Dominic Richardson, who else on our team do you see doing this?
I don't. And I don't really feel like there's a need to speculate on this. I mean, this was just something that Dominic Richardson decided to do. I mean, if you go through and see who hasn't played in 4 games, then you might be able to come across some names that you might find interesting. But, Dominic Richardson seems to be the main one here.
Who do you think will be the next 25 and 26 prospect to commit?
Ooh, good questions. I think Baylor is in a good spot with a lot of guys. And so that's kind of the hard part, especially in 2026. I still think that Baylor is going to eventually flip Zay Gentry from SMU. I still think that one is coming. It feels like it's been coming for a while now, and it just hasn't happened yet. So we'll see on that. But again, I feel like that one is coming at some point. There's a few other guys that they're working on flipping as well, but he's kind of the one that has kind of been, he's been to Baylor a bunch of times this year. He's had a lot of interest in Baylor for a while now. So I'll go with him. As far as 2026 goes, I think they're in a good spot with a few guys. I'll go with, how about Pasadena Memorial offensive lineman Devin Robinson? He's kind of a name that I've been keeping an eye on. There's a few other guys as well, like Mesquite Horn, offensive lineman Cole Seaton. Those two guys feel like they've been, really locked in with Baylor since they got offered. Robinson's been to, I think, like 3 or 4 of the home games this year, so clearly there's a lot of interest there. So I guess I'll go with those two for now.
And that'll wrap us up. Do you have that question from last week?
I do. So GMAC asks, thinking ahead to the matchup against West Virginia, what must Baylor do to get the win?
All right. Glad we got around back to that. I don't know. I just keep doing what they've been doing, man. I think they've found the winning formula, which is running the ball effectively, let Sawyer spray it around a little bit, and hit on the explosive play from time to time. They've had receivers and also Trigg, counting the tight ends, that have stepped up and made plays to not only catch the ball, but then make plays after the catch as well. Seen Hal Presley go up and make tough touchdown-type catches or first-down catches. Those are things that they just weren't doing. They weren't catching the tough ball. They weren't throwing the accurate pass in the big moment. They weren't running the ball at all. And they've done all of those things now suddenly. They're protecting Sawyer. So just do what you've been doing offensively. I think that's you already have stumbled upon the winning formula. And then defensively, I think a lot of what you've been doing up front's worked out pretty well. You're not getting turnovers, though. You're not getting a lot of pressure. I think defensively you can be better in every way other than you've been pretty good against the run in general. But outside of that, I think everything can stand to improve defensively. That's kind of where I am with it. And then special teams, I know you got the big game-winning kick, but that can't be a fleeting thing. That has to be now that's what you expect. That's how you become a program that continues to win big games. So, that was a great moment for Isaiah Hankins, but the next time he's out there, he's got to make that one too. This can't just be hey, remember that time that I made the one? So I'm glad he's got that confidence. That was a big step forward. The rest of special teams has been pretty good to really good. So offensively, do what you do. Defensively, everybody can get better. Special teams, stay consistent. Take it to another level as far as field goal kicking. That, to me, is just the whole, how can they be their best version of themselves? That's what I see with this team and subsequently against West Virginia.
Right. I think, for me, offensively, it's about running the football. I don't think they're going to have a problem throwing it, but if they can run the football, I think they can cause all kinds of problems for West Virginia and potentially go in there and put up a huge point total. If West Virginia can't stop either the run or the pass, they're going to have a lot of issues, I think, stopping Baylor. So running the football, I think, is the big thing because I think that opens up the explosive plays for the passing game even more and allows you to take more advantage of that really bad West Virginia secondary. Defensively, I just think stopping the run is the biggest thing. If you can stop the run, I think, and force West Virginia to move down the field consistently, I think you're going to be set up pretty well. And especially stopping the run with your front 7 guys so that your coverage guys can still play a little bit further back, I think is going to be a real key in this game. If Garrett Green plays, it makes life a little bit more challenging in that regard. But I think, again, if you stop the run, I think you put yourself in a really good position to go ahead and win this one.
All right, so we circle back to a question we didn't get to from last week, and hopefully that answered your question. We appreciate it, and thanks for holding on with us. And with the remaining time that we have here, I guess let's take a look at the Big 12. And what that has now turned into with 3 weeks to go is a race with one team clearly on top, although very much a question mark in terms of how they're kind of viewed nationally, which I know that now it's everybody's got to be pro Big 12 everything, which is kind of weird for me to adjust to because it's just I made fun of the SEC for so long for being this –
right,
this circle celebration, and it feels like everybody's gotten more territorial with realignment now, and I kind of don't love it, honestly. I love the Big 12, but I don't want to feel like I have to root for everybody all the time. You know what I mean? So it kind of gets exhausting. But if you're rooting for the conference, BYU is the best bet. I mean, that's the leader in the clubhouse, And if you want to have everybody get more money, which is also what we're now rooting for, like we got to root for big ratings, for big TV deals, for big checks to keep up with the, like that's where it just gets, again, like this whole thing. But if you want Baylor to get more money, then you need BYU to make the playoff. Like, so that's your best bet. But Colorado is actually your second best bet as it stands right now. And if we were to fast forward to Arlington, that would right now be the matchup on paper. BYU, if they win this weekend, is like virtually a lock. I don't know what the exact percentages are, but they would be unbeaten with 2 weeks to go. Everybody else would be trailing by a couple of games, so they'd basically be in that thing, whereas Colorado is the one trying to hold on to second place. So that's where we are right now, and there's still an outside shot for, I don't know, like Arizona State or Kansas State to jump in if things were to fall a certain way. But Iowa State's now dropped a couple in a row, so that's virtually eliminated them from most of the scenarios. And their magical season has kind of reverted back to the same old in some ways. But that's where we are. It's BYU's world and Colorado's to some lesser extent, and then it's just a race to kind of sort out the rest of it. But Houston at Arizona will kick off things this weekend, 9:15 on FS1. Arizona, 1-point favorites at home. They have been a massive disappointment. Houston has been much better than anticipated.
Right, and that's what makes this line a little bit interesting, just to see that, Houston's the underdog going into this game when Arizona's played much worse football than Houston. I think Houston's going to win this game. I think it's going to be ugly. I could see it being really ugly, but I think Houston finds a way. I just think their defense is going to slow down Arizona enough, and then I think they're going to be able to run the football on Arizona. Arizona's defense is really bad, and so, Houston's playing pretty well, so I think they're going to get to 5-5 after this weekend and have a chance at making a bowl game. Which is pretty crazy to think about.
If they make a bowl game in Willie Fritz's first season, then that is, a raise would be in order. I'm not usually for that. Colleges are usually pretty stupid when it comes to giving out money and burning it on coaches' salaries the moment they do something worthwhile. This would actually be worth it. If he got to 6 wins in year one with that roster, then he deserves a raise right out of the gates. That would be pretty incredible and would have you feeling incredible about the future at Houston as well. Man, I don't have any earthly idea here because you could see like 2 plays winning this game. Yeah. And Fafita McMillan can do that, but yeah, I guess I'd slightly lean Houston here. Arizona's just in such a bad way. Like that's an ugly game potentially for them if they were to lose that one, man. Brent Brennan might be out after 1 year if they were to lose that game. So, that's an interesting one. Arizona just a point favorite at home. I go slightly Houston, I guess, in that one. On Saturday, Utah at Colorado, 11 a.m. on Fox. Colorado is 10-point favorites, number 20 team in the country. Just went out. They'll be in Arlington to face off with BYU in the Big 12 championship game, but that's if you win out. Feel good about this week because I don't see any scenario where Utah can score enough points to be able to win this game, even if they play really good defense. So I'll go Colorado here.
I think Utah is about to give up on this season after that loss to BYU, so I'm going to go with Colorado as well, pretty easily.
Kansas State, number 19 team in the country, 9-point favorites at home against Arizona State and Kenny Dillingham, who are technically, like Kansas State, still in that Big 12 championship hunt. 6 p.m. on ESPN.
Arizona State's worst loss of the season was by 10 points, so I feel like they're going to cover this 9-point total, but I do think Kansas State is going to win this game. I think Arizona State's a little bit fool's gold. Their schedule has been unbelievably generous in Big 12 play so far this year. I think they're going to revert back a little bit, but, they're still set up really well to, finish 8-4 on the season.
K-State had a couple of weeks after that Houston loss to kind of get right. So, yeah, I think at home and just being a pretty good team and having a couple weeks to prepare, I think I'll go K-State there. Number 17, Iowa State at home against Cincinnati, 7 o'clock on Fox. 9-point favorites are the Cyclones. They've lost a couple games in a row, lost control of their own destiny, lost control of their perfect season, and got whipped pretty good by Kansas for most of that game before staging a comeback late and closing the gap and making it a heck of a run there late, but just came up short. So now Cincinnati at home.
I'm taking Iowa State to win this game, and a hot take, I think Cincinnati's about to lose out and miss out on a bowl game. That loss to West Virginia was a huge one because now they have at Iowa State, at K-State, and then TCU to finish the year. I think they're going to finish 5-7, and they had a great chance to make a bowl game, but they let it slip away against West Virginia.
Yeah, I'd take Iowa State here, and I could see that with Cincinnati as well. And then at 9:15, number 9, BYU, and maybe they'll be higher in the college football playoff rankings later on tonight, but not getting a whole lot of respect. And you know what? I understand. Like, I get it to some extent because we have to realize the resume is not what everybody's voting by, whether that's fair or not. I mean, it's just true, though. Like, you can't even get everybody to agree on what a top 25 win is. Are top 25 wins when you beat them they were ranked, or whenever they're ranked, they're ranked?
Right.
Or is it just whatever's both? So everybody's got their different way, which is whatever they want to use to set the narrative that they want to set. The narrative that's being set against BYU is that they've had a great run, but you put them up against the SEC's best, and they're not as good as like Ole Miss or whatever. So that's the battle that they're fighting right now. But just keep winning, and that says it all, and that's what they've done. Number 9 at home against Kansas.
Yeah, I'm taking BYU to end Kansas's season officially. There's been a lot of buzz about Kansas potentially winning out and going to a bowl game. I don't see that happening. I think it ends right here. Provo at night. Good luck. That's a really tough uphill climb, and I see Jalen Daniels turning it over a few times and BYU winning.
I think KU's played really well lately, and I could see an upset. I won't pick it, though, in Provo late at night. I'll go with BYU, but I don't think it's off the table entirely. And I think if they run into a team that's actually pretty good offensively, that could really be interesting.
Yeah.
But I don't think they've played any of the elite offenses in the Big 12 so far. That's why Colorado in the Big 12 title game could be a lot of fun. But, yeah, I'll take them at home this week. So there you go. There's the Big 12 schedule. And there's the full Bearcast for you.
We got one more game.
Oh, yeah, Baylor, obviously. Real quick, who you got, Baylor and West Virginia?
Yeah, I'm going to take Baylor to win this game. Baylor's a 2.5-point favorite, but I actually think they're going to win by more than that. I got the Bears taking care of business in Morgantown, 34-24. I just don't see West Virginia stopping Baylor's offense consistently enough, and I don't think West Virginia is explosive enough offensively, especially with Nico Marchiol at quarterback, and I expect him to start at quarterback for West Virginia. So I'm going to take Baylor by 10 points.
I'll have my official prediction later in the week like everybody else on the site, but I'll take Baylor for right now to get their first win in Morgantown. Don't have a score, like I said, but I will give them the slight edge as of this moment, just based on what we know. So we're both picking the Bears to close out this week's Bearcast, and much more to come throughout the week on Sikkim365.com and 365 Sports. But for now, that'll do it. For Grayson Grundhoefer, I'm Craig Smoak. Thanks for listening. Also, Garrett Ross behind the scenes. If you're watching on the Baylor Athletics on Sikkim 365 YouTube page, we're close to 4,000. Please hit that subscribe button and certainly that like button, and that would go a long way towards helping us and staying free and all that good stuff over on the YouTube side of things. So until next time, appreciate you listening, appreciate you watching. I'm Craig Smoak, and this has been the Bearcast on Sikkim365.com.